Dear United States Ambassador in Italy, Ronald Despogli, I'm writing concerning the intellectual rights, property law, the meeting and the speech you had at the Italian Foreign Office the last 24 October 2007, and primarily I'm writing to you because the Italian minister you had the meeting was already changed or eventually is to change soon, but you still there. I'm also writing to inform I really appreciate your efforts. I like you to know you have supporters, and sincerely I hope you will not be offended if I am to introduce few points more with you and few positive, reasonable suggestions. From your speech I understand Italy was awarded with the best counterfeiter prize, something concerning arts I suppose, but my motivation to write is to remind the opposite side of this problem you introduced, the intolerable side hidden out of the scene, out of the reports and out of the records. In fact, the issue concerning intellectual rights in Italy is more articulated than counterfeiting products and intellectual property fraud. In fact, unfortunately, for a set of cultural reasons, the Italian intellectual class never had the intellectual rights you wish them to respect. And I still ask myself how can exist an intellectual class without intellectual rights. Dear Ambassador, I understand the international law should apply in Italy as well, so why so many students have to emigrate from Italy in order to organize the scientific experimentations if they were not prevented to organize in Italy? And why, despite Italy has the highest number of professors and researchers, Italy imports all technologies, especially the super-protected public interest technology, pharmaceuticals included. We know, people know from the investigation of the media, all the most important pharmaceuticals have to be imported in Italy and usually cost 2-3 times more the actual price, but the media never explain where is it from, the indulgency fee. The ministry authorization black market and the monopoly regime to resell imported products the Italian society is prevented from develop. Is that copyright to defend? We know the scandals, fraud, bribery, but we don't know justice and we don't know intellectual rights, but the inquisition and brainwash of a certain traditional culture. This is a long story with a long history of intellectual intolerance, since the time the individualism, the individual conscience was banned from the Italian culture, since the time of the Reformation of the churches, before Italy was established. Yes, the intellectual rights is a matter of conscience and religion, and since this tradition began, was difficult to understand the boundary between intellectual emigration and intellectual intolerance, discrimination, victimization and persecution. Dear Ambassador, I'm sure you know in Italy today to read the patent form to the people is like translating the Bible 500 years ago, or worse, reading the patent to communists. This story has historical traditions, and for consequence to me was easier to emigrate in order to have the opportunity to organize the PhD I was prevented to organize in Italy. My life was clear, I was culturally obligated to emigrate, but one time I have made real my opportunity in England, the Italian office boycotted my project I organized in autonomy. They set me up, or casually, the professor in the picture of my degree ceremony stated they could not confirm the legal translation of my academic career with Marx. They made me do the impression of the impostor and they made a wop out of me, but I would like to ask, was that a matter of ransom or copyright to pay for the confirmation of the paper they issued no long before? In my experience, I have found academic support and financial sponsor in a foreign country and foreign language, but the Italian office from Italy could not confirm my degree with Mark. Does it make sense? Later, the fraud office Olaf of the European Commission, to reply my complaint, wrote a denunciation to the tribunal in Milan, but the case was never opened, and when the case was opened in Verona, the magistrate Papalia did not want to include the signature and stamps as evidence of the case. Dear Ambassador Spogli, in conclusion, I am one of too many emigrants from Italy because of problems with intellectual rights, scientific research, patent, ministry authorization and monopoly to import but not to produce. In England, I had PhD opportunity in order to improve a simple medical tool imported in Italy with the usual ministry-recognized research institute, but I have been transformed into a WOP, unreliable paperless. I couldn't even pronounce my name. I have lost my life, job, background. Nevertheless, in Italy today, in the country of Leonardo and Michelangelo, some recognized research institute import the color test from Switzerland with the ministry authorization on top, and the Italian society is prevented to make their own and prevented to understand a different philosophy behind. In conclusion, I really wish the problem could be resolved for the next generations, and for this reason I send you my understanding and two very effective, low-cost, high-profit suggestions. The first suggestion concerned the copyrights the Institute of Italian Culture pretend in order to propaganda Italy is a country with fantastic intellectual tradition of scientists and inventors like Leonardo and Galileo. But where did they have the copyrights from for this rendering of brain drain? I like to remind the territory of Italy was united 1861 as a Savoy kingdom, and before was never existed a flag to represent the union of the peninsula. For this reason Metternich said Italy eventually was a geographic definition like Asia. But my point doesn't concern the union of Italy rather than the culture of Italy and intellectual rights. In fact, the Italy we know didn't exist at the time of the supposed best intellectual Italian tradition, especially the Renaissance time. Why the culture of Italy mostly concerned the history of Italy when Italy didn't exist, and nobody knows the history of Italy since Italy was united, established and re-established a few times since 1861. How do they teach Italy is a country of scientists and inventors? Since Italy exists, the Italian scientists and inventors have to emigrate. This is the historic evidence of the cultural tradition of Italy. Leonardo Galileo couldn't be Italian, especially because the Renaissance culture was made of Catholic heresy, and the Inquisition was the Catholic office to deal with intellectual terrorists. The Renaissance culture was made of Catholic heresy, and Italy today is a Catholic country organizing propaganda of scientific and intellectual tradition Italian society have lost, and the Italian state create obstacles rather than promote. In conclusion, Leonardo and Galileo become Italian 500 years after they were dead, and never knew Italy was to be like the Vatican all over. Nevertheless, the Institute of Italian Culture in the university in the United States as well teach that Italy is a country with fantastic intellectual traditions, scientists and inventors like Leonardo and Galileo. Dear Ambassador, it is really them to deserve to be awarded with the best counterfeiter prize. But I would like to ask, how did they get the confirmation of their academic career? The second suggestion concerned the register for WOPs. I really welcome the creation of a register where Italian student or professional prevented from organized scientific research could make complaint. How many WOPs are created every year because of accidental misadministration? Is it possible to have research about this? Dear Ambassador, I have to ask, is that a copyright to pay to make the public administration work? We cannot talk, we are out of the scene, we don't know justice and we don't know intellectual rights but millenary system of censorship, corruption, indulgency. I would really like some university in the United States could organize a research to find out why all professors in the university, US included, teach Italy is a country of scientists and inventors, like Leonardo and Galileo, because Leonardo and Galileo never knew of Italy. Is it possible to organize a census for WOPs? Best regards.